In this video, we'll be taking a look at 3 college basketball games happening on December 15th, 2025, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 6 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 3 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Wofford versus Gardner-Webb. If you are looking at this matchup on a board full of bigger brand names, it is the kind of game you might scroll past, but it has a very clear story hiding in plain sight. On one side, you have Wofford, sitting at 6-4 with a new head coach already putting his stamp on the program, and they have not exactly been hiding from challenges. Trips to places like George Mason, Auburn, Northern Kentucky, and Eastern Kentucky are not glamorous, but bettors know those are the kind of gyms where a team either grows up or gets exposed. Wofford has already shown both sides of their personality, gutting out a rock fight at home against Presbyterian and also getting into those mid-80s type wins where the offense opens up and they look confident, almost loose, in space. That mix of experiences, the ugly and the pretty, actually matters when you walk into a building expecting to be the team that sets the tone rather than the one just trying to hang around. Across from that, Gardner-Webb feels like a team that has been stuck in quicksand for a month. 1 win, 11 losses, and that single win came at home against Brevard, a non-Division Y opponent that stopped the bleeding more than it truly reset the season. The pattern on their stat sheet is harsh but simple. They are getting outscored by roughly 20 points per game. Opponents are shooting over 51% from the field and almost 39% from deep, and every scouting report is circling the same soft spots. That is not just bad luck, that is a defensive profile that keeps giving visiting offenses life, even when those visitors have an off stretch or two. Add in the mental weight of that 1-11 record, the constant feeling of playing from behind, and you start to see why a fairly stable Wofford group that already has a couple of true road wins under its belt is not walking into some hostile, unpredictable trap here. If you like a bit of numbers behind the gut feel, ESPN's matchup model is leaning the same direction, giving Wofford somewhere around 80% win probability even though they are on the road. That does not guarantee a cover, of course, nothing does, but when you pair that kind of win expectancy with Gardner-Webb's habit of letting margins balloon and Wofford's experience in handling business against comparable or slightly weaker teams, the path where the favorite wins but fails to clear a modest road number starts to look like the less common branch. In plain terms, you are backing the team that is used to being organized against the team that has spent most nights trying to plug leaks. As our first pick for this matchup, the Wofford Terriers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. At first glance, you might expect something slower and kind of grindy, since Wofford is not trying to play like a run-and-gun arcade team. They are not racing up and down like some high major pressing group, but they are very comfortable letting the ball move side to side, hunting good threes, and trusting that over 40 minutes their shot quality will eventually wear a leaky defense down. They have had nights where the offense looks stuck in the mud and nights where they cruise into the mid-70s and mid-80s, and that inconsistency might sound scary from a betting angle, but it actually tells you something useful. This team has multiple ways to get to a decent point total, even when the rhythm is a little choppy. Gardner-Webb, for better or worse, turns almost every game into a scoreboard experience. When you are giving up close to 90 points per game, with opponents hitting over half their shots and raining threes at almost 39%, you are essentially inviting everyone into a shoot round where the rims feel soft for the other side. Their own offense is not hopeless either, and that matters for a total. A team that scores in the high 60s on average and occasionally pushes into the 70s does not need to be pretty to help an over. They just need to keep taking shots and keep getting to the line often enough that empty trips do not pile up. You can almost picture the flow. A few early threes fall for the visitors. The home side feels pressure to answer, the game loosens, and suddenly both coaches are burning timeouts trying to slow a run that has already put the total in play. Here is the thing that ties it together. You have one team that loves to shoot from deep and is willing to keep firing even through a cold stretch, and another team whose defense has not shown much evidence that it can consistently chase shooters off the line, contest without fouling, or finish possessions on the glass. Even if the tempo show does not look insane possession by possession, the combination of three-point volume, defensive breakdowns, and trips to the stripe tends to stack points in quiet little runs. It is the type of game where you glance up midway through the second half and realize the total is already flirting with that projected number, even though the pace never really felt out of control. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Wyoming versus South Dakota State. This matchup feels like a neat personality test between two college hoops programs, not just another December box score waiting to happen. Wyoming rolls in at 8-2, South Dakota State sits at 7-5, and they meet at the Sanford Pentagon in Sioux Falls, which is technically neutral but feels a lot more like home territory for the Jackrabbits and their fans. Wyoming under Sundance Wicks has picked a clear lane this season, playing faster, attacking the paint, and leaning on a deep rotation of long wings and forwards rather than hoping a couple of hot shooters bail them out. Names like Leland Walker, Nasir Meyer, Caden Bennett, Mattia Bellick, Gavin Gores, and Keani Saxon are all on the current active roster, and the staff has clearly built the thing around size, strength, and guards who can live in the lane, not just on Instagram highlight threes. What makes Wyoming interesting here is that the offense has popped without the defense falling apart. They are averaging around 88 points per game on almost 50% shooting from the field, but they are not just trading buckets for fun. They are still holding opponents in the low 70s and making teams work for clean looks. That is the kind of profile that usually travels pretty well to a neutral court. You are not relying on weird shooting variants as much as you are relying on getting a good shot on most trips and forcing the other side to grind every possession. On the other side, South Dakota State is in its first season under Brian Peterson, and you can see his fingerprints all over how they play. This is a more controlled, slower group that would rather win by tightening the screws than by getting into a race. The Jackrabbits' core is intact and current, with guards like Jaden Jackson, Joe Saylor, Bubs Alvarez, and Kalen Gary, plus frontcourt pieces such as Davis Kern, Matthew Moores, and big man Damon Wilkinson all confirmed on the 2025-26 roster and available. They have had some really clean defensive outings, the kind of games where they drag opponents into the mid-60s and walk them out of the gym looking annoyed, but the offense can get stuck for stretches when the jumper is not cooperating. That is where the difference between these two teams tends to show up, because Wyoming has more ways to manufacture points when Plan A does not work. The betting market has come in with Wyoming as a modest favorite at around -4.5 on the spread, which already tells you books respect the Cowboys a bit more without turning this into a blowout expectation. Model-based projections take that gap and stretch it even further, with DRATINGS, for example, landing on something like a 7 to 8 point Wyoming edge on a neutral floor. ESPN's matchup predictor leans the same way, giving Wyoming close to a 70% win probability. When numbers that do not care about brand names and a neutral court that should theoretically blunt some of South Dakota State's home comfort all tilt in the same direction, it suggests that if Wyoming simply plays to its established level, they are more likely to finish this one winning by more than a single possession. Throw in that at least one established handicap outlet is already recommending Wyoming against the spread, and you get a picture that keeps nudging you toward the same side, possession by possession, rather than screaming for a contrarian by instinct alone. As our first pick for this matchup, the Wyoming Cowboys to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. First glance at the board and you see a number in the low 150s, roughly 150 to 151.5, sitting next to a team that just hung 106 points on South Dakota a week ago, and it is very easy to assume this one turns into a shootout. Honestly, that is how most casual bettors' brains work. You remember the recent blowout, you see a high total, and you connect those dots right away. But totals are more about how the game is likely to be played than what happened in one loud win. Here is the thing, Wyoming has sped up compared to last season, sitting in the upper tier nationally in possessions per game, but they are not a pure run and gun outfit. They still defend at a top 50 level on a per-possession basis, which quietly caps how wild their games can get even when the pace ticks up. South Dakota State has gone the other direction under Peterson, slowing down into the mid-200s in tempo rankings and building a defense that is genuinely one of the more efficient units in the country, especially once you look at games played away from home or on neutral floors. That combination of faster but still very competent defense on one side and a slower, stingier defense on the other often leads to games that feel tense and physical but do not necessarily explode past the upper totals. Rebounding is another quiet piece of the scoring puzzle. Both teams are strong on the defensive glass, and South Dakota State in particular has been elite, sitting near the very top of Division I in defensive rebound percentage and allowing opponents to grab barely more than 1 out of every 5 misses. Wyoming is not far behind, tracking in the national top 50 in that same category. When you cut off second chance points like that, you cut down the little scoring bursts that normally push a game from 140-something into the 150s. 1 miss, 1 rebound, ball the other way, rather than 3 shots per trip. If you look at the season-long scoring profiles, they actually line up pretty neatly with a slightly lower game than the posted number suggests. Wyoming sits around 88 scored and just over 71 allowed. South Dakota State is in that low 70s scored, mid-60s allowed window. That math does not guarantee anything for one night. Nothing in betting does, but it paints a picture of two teams that, on average, land a little shy of the market total when you mash their offensive and defensive identities together. And this is a neutral site December game with unfamiliar rims, travel, and a slightly different routine. Things that often shave a possession here, a made jumper there, without anyone really noticing except the folks who bet the total. What really ties it together is that the sharper projection models and at least one respected totals handicapper are already sitting clearly under the current line. G Ratings projects a combined score in the high 40s, around 149.5, and Greg Peterson's handicap comes in even lower, pegging his total at about 141.5 while still seeing value on anything 151.5 or higher. None of that guarantees a brick fest. There are always paths to a wild shooting night, but when the pace numbers, the rebounding edge, the defensive efficiency, and the sharper projections all lean in the same direction, it tells you the game is more likely to settle into a controlled, slightly lower scoring script than the headline scoring average suggests. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. McNeese versus Houston Christian. McNeese rolls into Tiny Sharp Gym on Monday as the team everyone in the Southland is tired of seeing on the marquee. And honestly, you can see why. They are sitting at 9-2 on the season, fresh off back-to-back years of running this league and now doing it again with a new voice on the sideline. The identity has not changed much though. This group still plays like a veteran pickup squad that somehow got dropped into a mid-major league, calm, physical, and completely comfortable dragging you into their style. They are outscoring opponents by almost 24 points per night, putting up about 88.9 points and giving up only 65.4, and that kind of spread between what they do and what they allow usually tells you more than any highlight reel. Houston Christian, on the other hand, is working through a different type of story. They sit at 5-5, a very honest record for a program trying to climb the conference ladder in year 2 under Craig Doty. They just played an emotional overtime game against Southeastern Louisiana on Saturday, came up short at home, and now they have to turn around and face the league bully again in the same small gym where the rims are familiar but the matchup is not friendly. That is the kind of scheduling spot where legs feel a little heavier in the second half. And against a punishing defensive team, heavy legs usually show up first in ball handling and closeouts. Here is the thing with this McNeese roster. It is not just that they score, it is how ruthlessly they defend. The numbers say opponents are shooting under 40% from the field and around the low 30s from deep against them, and that is not happening by accident. They live in passing lanes, they sit on actions like they have seen the playbook, and they force turnovers on roughly a little more than 1 in every 5 possessions, which is one of the very best rates in Division I right now. They do it with length at every spot, and with a guard room that treats on-ball defense like a personal challenge. Larry Johnson leads them in scoring, Garway Duel runs the show and piles up assists and steals, Jacob Fredson Cole does the unglamorous work on the glass, and Jero Colbert erases mistakes around the rim. And the important part for bettors is that all of those pieces are on the current roster, playing real minutes, and not stuck on an injury list. When you set that kind of aggressive, structured defense against a Houston Christian group that has been more comfortable playing through skilled guards than through brute force size, the matchup tension becomes pretty obvious. The Huskies' offense is fine on paper, around the low 70s per game, but they are giving up a very similar number on the other end, which means their margin for error is razor thin when the opponent is elite. Their guards like Kylan Green can absolutely create. He is a senior, he has the ball in his hands plenty. and he is fully active on this roster, but against this particular opponent he is going to see long bodies, traps, and a scouting report that has his name circled in pen. If McNeese can turn even a small uptick in turnovers into runouts, those are easy points that never test their half-court offense, and that is exactly how big road favorites slowly squeeze the life out of a home underdog in a small gym. Add in the stylistic contrast on defense, and the case tightens up. Houston Christian has allowed opponents to shoot close to 38% from three this season, and they do not exactly crush teams on the defensive glass, which is a dangerous combination against a physical, downhill team that keeps pressure coming in waves. McNeese might not play at a breakneck pace. They are actually in the slower third of Division I possessions per game, but that kind of efficient, grown man defense tends to travel well, especially against an opponent that is still figuring out its pecking order for scoring. Books know all of this, which is why they have no problem hanging a double-digit number in the neighborhood of 12.5 on the road for McNeese, and the underlying matchup still leans toward the favorite having more paths to win by real separation rather than sneaking out a one-possession result. As our first pick for this matchup, the McNeese Cowboys to cover the spread as favorites is our full-game side pick. The total number is sitting in the high 130s, which at first glance feels reasonable when you know McNeese is averaging close to 89 points per night. But that is where pace quietly sneaks into the conversation. McNeese plays fewer possessions than the average Division All-Cent team, and Houston Christian is also on the slower side, living in the mid-60s in terms of trips per game. So we are talking about two teams that actually grind more than they run. If you have watched enough mid-major hoops, you know that slow tempo does not always mean low scoring by itself. Sometimes you get a game where both offenses are operating like a well-oiled half-court machine and the scoreboard still climbs. Here, though, the more interesting piece is how those possessions are likely to look. McNeese is holding opponents to inefficient shooting nights and forcing all kinds of uncomfortable, late-clock situations, which often end in bad shots, trips to the line in single digits, or just plain empty possessions. That kind of defense turns a 40-minute game into what feels like a series of quizzes, each one draining a little more energy and tempo. Houston Christian's overall scoring profile suggests they are capable of getting into the 70s when things are flowing, but their own defense is leaky enough that they cannot always control how fast games feel. They allow a healthy percentage from beyond the arc, which can either light the game on fire if shots fall or, just as often, create long rebounds that extend possessions in weird ways without actually adding that many points to the total. It is a bit like a three-point happy pickup game where everyone keeps letting it fly, but if only one side is really comfortable, you just get a lot of missed threes, scrambles, and reset offenses rather than some clean, efficient shootout. Another subtle factor is how a game like this can tighten up mentally. When one roster knows it is walking into the gym against a much stronger defensive unit, the natural instinct is often to slow down, call sets, and try to manufacture clean looks instead of trading quick shots. On the other side, when a team like McNeese has genuine postseason goals and a coach who leans on defense first, they are rarely in a rush to turn the night into an up-and-down track meet if they can control tempo with stops and long, deliberate offensive possessions. You end up with a script where runs happen, but scoring comes in controlled waves instead of constant back-and-forth fireworks. So while the raw scoring averages might tempt you toward expecting a shootout, the blend of slower tempo from both teams, a defense-first mentality from the favorite, and a home underdog that may be more comfortable trying to keep things steady than racing makes a final score that lands under the posted number look more realistic than the surface stats suggest. In other words, this has more of a methodical, defensive tilted rhythm written on it than a track meet that pushes both sides comfortably into the 80s. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.